It is my pleasure and excitement to be moderating tonight's webinar. My name is Junie Peterson, and I serve on the Community Theater Association of Michigan's Board of Directors. I have so for the last several years, and really enjoy the mission of the organization, and very excited to be a part of it, and very excited to be bringing this entire week-long session of webinars and roundtables to your theaters, and even more excited to be doing it completely free of charge, which I think is fantastic. Tonight we've got Faux Food, brought to you by the extremely talented Michael Wilson. Michael has been creating props for the stage productions for over 25 years. Not only is he a prop master for the Grand Rapids Civic Theatre, he's also created props for the Opera, Grand Rapids, Circle Theatre, Grand Valley University, Aquinas College, and Mason Street Warehouse. Over the years, Michael has developed a special focus on creating a specialty and faux foods for stage props. So I'm not going to take up any more of your time, Michael. I'm going to get right to it. I want to throw out just one last reminder as we are getting underway, is that if, again, you are also going to be attending the roundtable discussion on intimacy, that you'll want to check your email, as we have sent out a new link to invite you to that roundtable. Okay. All right, and I'm going to get right to it. Here you go, Michael. Oh, we got a little technical difficulty here. I'm not here. Can we try that again, Michael? No, again, I'm still not receiving your audio. Uh-oh. Yep, nothing just yet. Okay. Let's give them just a second here.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes. Okay. Perfect. Okay.
Hello and welcome. So glad that you could join us this evening. I would like to take just a quick minute here and recognize the crew who is helping me today to put this on. First of all, we have Rhonda Leon, who is my stage manager, and then the production team is Cody Colvin, Matt Siegel, Kyle Aspinall, and Alex Weiss. So thank you to them for helping with this. This evening, we're going to talk first a little bit, a demonstration of one of my more versatile materials that I use in making fake food for the stage, and that's just a simple silicone clay. It's made with simple ingredients of just the cornstarch, and then like just 100% construction silicone. You can get that at any of the big box building stores or your hardware stores. Just get it in clear, and it works wonderfully. So what we do is we start, the idea is to get to something that is about the size of a golf ball. So this is messy. You want to make sure that you'll notice I'm wearing neoprene gloves. I like to use the mechanic grade ones. They take a lot of wear and tear because this stuff sticks until it starts to set up. So, come on. And I missed something.
As we're going through and getting the webinar underway, I just want to remind all of our attendees, if you'll notice either at the bottom or the right side of your screen, you'll have a small tab that says Q&A. And this is the perfect place to deposit any types of questions you may have about the procedures tonight, about products you might see being used by Michael, or anything else you might have. we're going to go ahead and address all of those questions right inside of that Q&A tab. And it looks like we are still having a bit of a technical difficulty here, so I do apologize for that, and hope you can stick with us here for just a minute as we sort that out. All right. Here we go. It looks like we've got just a bit of a connection issue. As you can see in the remarks, it looks like we lost some connectivity. I can see we've got some connection coming back with Rhonda here. He must be getting carryout. That's right. That gives me an excellent opportunity to kind of plug what else is happening on this week. Right after tonight's webinar, we have an intimacy roundtable, which is fantastic. Talk about some of those sensitive things. And Michael looks to be back, so let's get him back in the mix.
Thank you.
And I apologize for our little technical problem here as we lost our Ethernet for a bit here. I have added a little bit of the silicone into the cornstarch, and I'm just using a tongue depressor to mix it in. Just slowly start to get it in. It gets a little crumbly, and just keep adding it as you go. Like I said, the thing that you're trying to get to is some material that's about the size of a golf ball. It seems to be about the size and quantity of the material that works the best, because you do have to understand that this stuff has a shelf life. As it starts to cure, it is somewhere around 15 minutes or so that you have to work with it before it just isn't going to cooperate with you anymore. So once I get it in there a little bit, then it's easier to just start using my hands. And just like you're working with bread or pie dough, you just keep working it in there until you have it all up and kind of put together. Then I have found that you can add a couple of drops of like baby oil. That will help extend the life just a little bit. It isn't too much longer, but it'll give you a few more minutes. And the other thing that will do is you'll get a little bit of a smoother texture. The consistency that you're trying to get to, it's really a feel. The best thing that I can say is it kind of feels like silly putty, as opposed to like Play-Doh. It has that feeling towards it. So it's still a little bit sticky, so I'm going to add some more cornstarch into this thing. And we just keep working it as we go there, starting there. Then the object that we're going to make today is a tomato slice, which we'll use for a sub sandwich. I have I pre-mixed some color, and it's with three different, this concoction is kind of made with three different things of acrylic paint. Just a regular straight orange. This one is this is just a basic yellow. And then the red here is, which one was this? This is just a really nice bright red. These are all just Anita's Craft acrylics, but you can use any one of them. I don't tend to use just a color, especially when you're making things which are natural to the environment, like vegetables and those kind of things. Mixing the colors gives you more of a realistic thing. Once you have your clay starting to form up, now you can start adding the paint into it. And I just add it in. This is where it starts to get really messy, and this is where you really, really are thankful for the fact that you have gloves on. And just start working it in, and it's just play. As soon as you do that, you're going to feel it gets, you can see it gets sticky right away again. So keep adding in some more of the cornstarch. And I need a lot more cornstarch. There's nothing in building props that is neat and easy when you're doing this stuff. It is always a mess. It's part of the joy, I think, of what it is that I do. I like the adventure of moving through and figuring out how it works. Again, I just keep moving it in, working it on. Once you have it so it isn't really sticky, it gets easier to work the color into it. You do have to work it quite a little bit to make sure that you have this color, the paint color, moved all the way through. You can see because of the amount of cornstarch that I put in it, it feels and looks kind of pinkish yet. And I need a little bit more color here. And again, just keep working it. There we go. And like I said, it's a feel. And the only way I can explain it is you will know when you get there. It just suddenly, the texture changes. It has that almost squeak feel when you squeeze it, like silly putty does. There we go. We'll set that aside. I'm going to get this stuff out of my way here and get this part of the mess out and get another piece of wax paper in here. That is the other thing that you do want to remember is have something down on your work surface. I find wax paper works really, really good. It's inexpensive. Things don't stick to it real well and that. So now we're going to have to start forming it up. A couple different ways that you can do it. I just take a little cornstarch and I just use a dowel for my roller, roll it up, add a little bit of cornstarch onto your surface also so that as you get it thin, it doesn't stick. I want a consistent depth to the piece. So I'm going to use these two little pieces of wood here to help me to get it to the size that I want it here. And just keep rolling it in and rolling it out until you have a piece that's big enough so that you can cut your circle for your tomato slice. But it is all possible too. You can just do it freehand. It works either way. I like to use an X-Acto knife when I'm working and cutting with this stuff. So now we're going to, first of all, put this back in. And I'm just going to cut my tomato slice. Remember, there isn't anything perfect in nature. There is no perfect circle. Our eye doesn't like that kind of stuff. So this I'm just going to set aside. And you see, I've got a lot of cornstarch on it. Now at this point, you would set this aside and let it dry. Before you actually, I'm skipping a step here. You can then, you notice on the tomatoes, we have the little pockets where the fluid and the seed are. And so we're going to cut those out also. On a tomato slice, there's usually anywhere from 3 to 5, 6, 7, depending on your tomato. A lot of times I also really use a photo. I print up a lot of photos that help for reference as we go along. So I'm just going to cut these all out now. And pop them out. Once it has set up, we will get that fluid put into it at that point. I'm going to set this aside now because it would cure. You're going to want this to set up for 3 or 4 hours to be a little bit firmer before you go on. So I'm going to skip on in to the next piece that I have here, magically done in advance, so we don't have to sit and wait for all of the stuff to go. The other part here at this point, then once it has set up, then just take a kind of a little bit of a stiff bristle paintbrush, and you can just, you'll find it, you just wipe all of that away. I can get rid of these gloves now. We're not playing in the mess anymore. And just dust it off. If it's not coming off at this point, this stuff is set up and hard enough that you can take a damp rag and you can wash it off to get rid of that little milky cast that still sits on it.
Hey, Michael.
Yes.
We have a great question.
Okay.
Mike would like to know, how long does it take to set?
To set as in not workable, or to set in being handleable?
Yep, I believe the
okay.
second.
In handleable, I would let it go for 2 or 3 hours so that it feels, now it's feeling more like a thick rubber in here. The product itself, once it has start to set, like I said, it's in that 15 to 18 minute area. You can't work with it anymore. It starts to get crumbly. It won't roll out. It won't shape right and hold its shape. So there's kind of 2 different time frames that you're looking at. So now we have this done. So now it's time to work on getting that the juice, so to speak, in there. What I use is just an epoxy glue, the 2-part stuff. You can mix it up. I'm going to just mix it up here on my sheet, but little containers work really good for that. Just make sure that whatever you're using is disposable. And also remember, with epoxy, it cures by heat. So when you're dealing with really thin plastic containers, sometimes it can start to melt them a little bit. So you make sure you thoroughly mix the 2 parts so that it'll start that process, that chemical process, and start that. Now you'll see this stuff dries fairly clear, and that fluid that's in a tomato has a little bit of a color to it. What works really, really well for coloring that is just an alcohol dye. This one is by Ranger, I believe. It's called Honeycomb, and it doesn't take too much of this stuff to do it. So I'm going to just put a drop onto it like that and mix it in. And it takes the color really well. It doesn't stop the chemical reaction. I will warn you on this stuff. Using food coloring like the stuff you get at the grocery store, the inexpensive stuff, that will change the chemical makeup of it, and it won't harden as well. So then just kind of scoop it up and get it into the pocket.
Michael, where can our attendees find the alcohol-based paint?
Most any good quality craft store will have that. They tend to be one of my best friends. As I'm finding all of these things, the two places that I tend to be in the most are the home building places and hardware stores and hobby stores. That does it. So there, you've got that in there. The seed themselves, little simple trick. It's just red pepper flakes. We're just taking the seeds that are in it. I find it easiest to work with the tweezers to get them in there. And I just kind of pick them out of here and drop them into place. Be random about it. Because like I said, nothing in nature is perfect. Do kind of poke it down in there a little bit so that it stays there.
Michael, someone is asking if you've tried paste food coloring before.
I have not used the paste food coloring in this epoxy stuff. When a little bit further down the road, we'll talk about some of the things that I use for liquids in glasses, and I have used it on that, and that works pretty decent. Some of it is just trial and error, and when you're doing these things, you have to be willing to fail. That is where you find the processes. I really view doing this stuff as a game. So just get those all in there, and I'm going to get this cleaned off here before I epoxy glue my tweezers. And we're going to jump to the next one. So now we have that step here. And at this point, we're ready to do a little bit of detail painting. You'll notice in the picture that the center of the flesh on the tomato has that yellowish white color. And again, I use wax paper as a palette all the time, but you can also use cheap paper plates work wonderful. Anything that's disposable. And we're just going to put a little bit of this out here. That don't like it quite that yellow, so I'm adding a little bit of a cream white to it. This one is called Sunshine Yellow, and this is just a buttercream. Another item that I use a lot of is toothpicks. Popsicle sticks, tongue depressors, toothpicks. They are all great for that kind of stuff. Mix my color up a little bit. Grabbing a smaller detail brush and a little bit of paint. And you don't want it to be too thick or too blatant. Just kind of put it on in there, work it around, fade it out in the color wise. So like that's too much, that's too intense. So you want to get it to go down. It works up into the stems a little bit in there and there. Then you also notice there are these little dots that tend to be in the flesh. The end of your paint stick works really well for that. So just kind of randomly drop them on in. Then you let that sit until your paint is dry. Acrylic paints dry quickly. And then you're ready for the next part. One of the things, the step I should tell you about is when you have put the epoxy in to make the seed pockets and it's sitting on your wax paper, After it has begun to set up and it's past the tacky stage, you're going to want to carefully start to pull it up off of the wax paper. And you'll know if it's not cured enough because it'll start to try to pull, it'll stick to the paper too much. Once it's set up, you can separate it fairly well. And so you just kind of do that. If you let it sit there too long, you can just pull it off, and a little bit of warm water and a little bit of friction with your finger, and you'll wash that wax paper off right away.
Michael, we have a question.
Yes.
Can you store the dough in an airtight container to use at a later date?
No, it's a chemical reaction that cures the silicone. And so once committed, you're committed.
Okay, the second part here
Yep.
is also, does the final product harden to a brittle state?
No, even this one, which it's not a brittle, there's some flex to it. I could break it if I really tried. It would crack and crumble, but it's a pretty versatile thing. When another thing that this works really well for is like cheese for a sandwich. This was formed. I just rolled it out, cut the triangle, and then I dried it laying on a dough like that. Once it was set, the thing stays. I also use it for like lunch meat and that kind of stuff. The thinner you go with your rollout, the more flexible it becomes as it cures. The next step in here then is, after tomatoes have a wet look to them. It's the fluid that leaks from the flesh. It's the juice. And so the way I get that wet look is just using a clear gloss polyurethane. You can use either the water base or the oil base. Oil base will take longer to dry. It will take fewer coats of the oil base to get this nice glossy look. But all you do is you just paint it on and let it dry. If you're using the water base, it goes on kind of a milky white, and you will have to do 2 or 3 thin coats to get that nice high gloss that will feel like it's wet. Question?
Michael, how thick, you talked about how thin, but how thick can you make them? And also, how long will the final product stay to be reused for future plays?
I find that the life on this stuff, once it's into the piece, it seems to be indefinite. I think extra time, especially if it's exposed to big fluctuations in temperature and stuff, is going to shorten that. But really, I have yet to find anything that I've made in the past that isn't still usable at this point. Thickness wise, I mean, you can literally make a ball out of this stuff and get it cured. It just takes longer for that. The thicker and heavier the whole item is, the harder it is to get a short time of drying and curing time. So it just kind of rolls that way. So anyway, so once that's done, that's what we have. And then we have all kinds of products. Again, easy. Look at that. Just washes right away. So that's kind of how I build it in that. And then we start to get into the applications that I use it for. I'm going to step away from the camera a minute. I will be right back with the plate. I want to show this over here. What we're coming to is this item right here, a sub sandwich. We created this for Junie B Jones. We have the silicone-based product that are involved in this one are the tomato, the lunch meat, and the cheese. And they are here on the plate here. You have different examples of it. There's the different, all of these things are what is in there along with the tomato. The lunch meat was done out of that silicone clay also, just rolled very, very thin. We picked it up and just kind of folded it onto itself and let it sit. One thing I did learn about this is that I was building these just before COVID closed everything down. And so I had all the lunch meat made and sitting on my work tables. And when we left the theater, I kind of gathered it up and I stacked it all on a plate. What I had never foreseen, and I've never seen it happen before, but it did, where it stacked on top of each other, it changed the color. You can see it a little bit on the bottom side here, where here is the natural color. Where it was touching something else, it took on a cast that's really weird. So I guess I will take that as a learning process. I don't stack this stuff anymore without putting a layer of something in between it. The lettuce is just simply silk lettuce leaf. Just like this stuff here, just again, you can get it at your craft stores. I cut the main vein out and it works better. I have yet to find anything that makes faux lettuce better than the silk. I keep trying though. The onion are just a very simple thing. There's just zip ties. And so then it just all went together from there. We'll talk about the bun in a moment, but right now I just layered them in. The stuff is all just hot glued in here to keep it in place. So again, you have the tomato, the lettuce, the meat, the onions, the cheese, and the bread. I'm going to step over to the other table here where I have it's a bunch of examples of other food things that I'd have, and we can talk with them from there. You'll see on this table, everything here is faux. It's all created separately and in different things. There are many different types of materials used. The peaches, the question that we had on how thick they are. These peaches are done with that silicone clay. So you can see how big and thick and heavy this is. It took a couple days for it to be completely cured, but then it worked nicely from there. I textured the center a little bit where the pit was, just taking a X-Acto knife, roughed it up a little bit, and then brushed it really lightly with just that orangey color to do it from there. The sauce is strictly, once again, it's just the epoxy stuff that was drizzled over it and went from there. Just to do it in a different way, I did it in slices also. Cookies work really good out of the silicone clay. I tend to work it in two different ways. You can color it if you want to, right into it, but you can also leave it in its natural color and then paint. It takes paint really well. We have a plate here that I'm going to bring around of just some different ways of dealing with it. Have a sugar cookie. Texture it a little bit, give it a little bit of extra so it looks a little burnt on the bottom. Sugar cookies have sugar on top of them. The thing that works really, really well that I've found for that is just the iridescent glitter. And you can do it in the really fine or the really small. We have ginger snap. This one here was just a quick test to try to do something. I wanted to try something with the chocolate chip. The chocolate chips are actually just wooden beads, and I mixed some of them into the clay, and then I laid some on them. It was just an attempt, an experiment to see what different looks that I had. But this dough was actually colored with paint before I put anything into it. Other things that we have here in all of the well, let's talk about the bun first for that. The bun, I've struggled for a while in finding something that worked really well to be a good looking bread. I've always settled on kind of on foam as working for it, but I was never happy with it. It didn't have the look. You can paint it, but foam tends to suck it up, and it takes a long, long time for it to dry. So what I have found is that the thing to use is wood glue. Just one brand or another of old-fashioned wood glue. What you will find is that different brands have a different color of yellow. The one that I tend to use the most is this one here. I like the creamier yellow that it dries in. Elmer's does do the same thing, but it dries much yellower. So that's just a preference kind of a thing. But take your foam and just completely paint it and cover it with the glue, and then let it set up, and it gets that nice hard texture that bread crust has, and it's easy to paint and texture from there.
Hey, Michael.
Yes.
How about if we tell everyone the process that you went through for getting the shape of the bread?
I'm going to get to that right now.
Great.
So we started with just upholstery foam. I cut it into a basic form. This one will eventually turn into 2 half slices of the sub, but just cut them out that way. With upholstery foam, the best way to cut it is with an electric knife. As you're using it, it's really important. Clean the blades often. Just pop them out, take a rag, wipe it down. They'll stay sharp so much longer. Once I did that, then I took the electric knife and I started to get it into the round shape. Then the thing that finishes this off really well is once I have a rough shape of that kind of a torpedo shape, I took it over to my belt sander with a kind of a medium to a slightly coarse grade sandpaper on it, and it sands really well. But I will say, make sure you wear a mask when you're doing that, because you will breathe in so much fine dust, but it shapes it so quickly and so easily. I really like doing that. Once I did that, then I cut it into its halves and then split it, but I didn't cut it all the way through. And there, now we have our bread form. Once I painted, and like I said, you paint the entire surface, inside and out, with that. The nice thing about the glue is it starts to set it up, and so I just take some toothpicks and stick them in here and leave it sit, and by the time the glue has dried, the sandwich just stays open like you need it to be. After that, paint it as you want to. The reason that I like to use the Gorilla Wood glue is I like this color. It's a really great base color. You don't have to add so much paint onto it. And then it's just taking various browns and golds and painting the color of the crust that you want it to be. The inside is just some kind of a cream white. If you wanted to do whole wheat, you go a little bit more bread, or a little bit more brown to it, but that's kind of it. Yes, Rhonda.
Mike would like to know if you airbrush any of this.
I do some airbrushing. I really like the fineness of it, but there is something that I still really like, the tactile use of paint, where I'm using brushes or paper, anything like that. There's so many different textures that you can get with it. So, but yeah, if you're looking for really nice graduation and colors and stuff like that, airbrush would work really well. Another thing that foam works really well for are French fries. Just cutting them down into them. These were actually, I actually had foam that was a little bit on the yellow side, and we cut it down. So that helped me that way. But then spray paint, and until we had the texture. So that was kind of that. Other things that you see in these dessert things here. Oh, the drinks. Okay. First, I'm going to talk about the desserts. Wax here. Some of these items are just styrofoam, and the whipped cream is actually the lightweight whipped spackling that you use to patch the holes in your wall. Even quilt batting to get these little poofy things. Foam, etc. Wax in the cordial cups. Here, the little cupcake things are a foam base. The melted chocolate is actually hot glue. Just drip it on there, let it set up, and paint it, and it makes really great chocolate. The drinks that you see here are a couple of different things. There is the one old standby of just paint the glass. It works. Just remember, don't use such pure color. The others, the wine and stuff, it's a couple of different products I use. It's the item it's craft water. It's the stuff that the florists use to put fake water into permanent arrangements. It grows, or it comes as a crystal clear thing. This product here, which is craft water, is simply, it's one item. You take this and you put it in boiling water, and it turns the gel into a liquid, and then you can pour it from there. The other one is like this. This is a two-based product similar to the epoxy stuff, where you mix the two together. Again, it's clear, and you have to color it. Same story on using these products. The grocery store food coloring does something to the chemical makeup, and it doesn't set up correctly. I will use the alcohol ink, or I will also use the dye that you can find in the candy aisles. It's a higher quality stuff. Sometimes it's liquid, sometimes it's paste, and you just have to experiment. On all of those, it doesn't take a lot to get your color to change. So the rosé here was just a little bit of a pink. It's poured in. This is quite solid. This was the epoxy one. The beer, yeah, the beer was the other version, the single gel one. You want to know how I get the bubbles into it, and that is you pour it all in there, and then you stir. And you stir. You just kind of whip it up. But you need to be careful, because you don't want it to be touching the sides of the glass where you don't want it to be. Once it touches that glass, it's there. And it doesn't clean up very easily. So be careful in doing that. But you pour your liquid in, you let it start to set up. And then you whip it. And then you set it aside. You're keeping an eye on it. And you'll see that the bubbles will start to rise out of it. Whip it up again until you can't get it to whip anymore. The only thing I have yet to get figured out correctly, when I did this and I had it all whipped up, I had a nice layer of a foam head on the beer here. But after it sat overnight and cured, that dissipated. So I have yet to figure out a good way of getting the foam onto it yet, but I keep trying. There's a whole lot of play involved in doing these kind of things. Do we have any questions on the liquids? Okay. Other things that you see here, we have the seafood plates. They were pretty easy, really. I went to Red Lobster and said I want some lobster tail shells. They looked at me like I was a bit crazy, and cleaned them up and set them in place. The butter, again, is just the epoxy, but it's the little kind of detail things that you add to it. Take a little bit of wax and vegetable peeler and flick some of it off, and you have butter flakes that are stuck in the epoxy. The lemon wedges here I just actually took a purchased fake lemon and cut it into a wedge. You know, they're styrofoam inside. I scooped the styrofoam out of it, and it left me a nice skin, and I just kind of rolled it up, and it was all right there. The muzzles, again, they're just empty muzzle shells, and then little bits and pieces. But it's also, put a fork on the plate, make it look like it is. Other things that I have found that work really well in doing liquids, again, going back to the liquids. If you're looking for coffee, you can do coffee or tea with this stuff. But another thing that works really well with that is just take your teacup and cut a piece of foam and put it into the glass at whatever level you want it to be, and paint it for your coffee or your tea color. From stage, it looks wonderful. It's very light, and you don't have the issues of liquids on the stage. Yes.
Speaking of liquids, Marie has a great question. She asked, is the milk colored with paint or some kind of powder?
The milk was colored with some acrylic paint added into it to get that milky white. There really is not a dye that gives you this nice milky look. It took a bit of practice and repetition to find the right balance. And I wouldn't use the single product that you boil in the water. I would make sure when you're doing milk, do the epoxy. It tolerates that acrylic paint in it much more. But those are the kind of touches with your food on the stage that make it. The other thing to remember is when you put things into glasses, make them different levels. People have picked them up. They've drank from them, etc. So make different looks. Don't make everything consistent. Again, our eyes do not like to see consistent. We're so programmed for recognizing patterns. And even without thinking about it, it can make us uncomfortable. Where else can we go here? Here again, we have wax and the epoxy, and then actually Christmas decorations. And then I had some fake blueberries that I added to it from there. And that's kind of where things are. I'm open for other questions or directions that people would want to go in. So again, you can see here in working with the tomatoes, they've got a good coat on them. I've secured them just with a little, these are actually on with a little bit of poster putty just to hold them into place, but you can hot glue any of those types of things. One of the other thing when you're working with this is, let's talk about the glass a minute. You can use glass. It works, but I try not to have glass on stage if at all possible. These I have found are wonderful. It's really a dollar store champagne glass. You think they're $2 for $1 when you get them, but they have a nice look to it. They don't have a cheap plastic look. The detailing makes all the difference in the world. They do have a tendency, they feel top heavy with this. So if you have somebody who is serving drinks off of a tray, you need to come up with something. A couple of different ways you can do it. You can take the thin carpet tape and tape your tray over, and then kind of get a lot of the sticky off, but so it's still tacky. And if you set them down firmly on it, they'll stay there. And when they need to go pick it up, anyone who needs to pick it up, if you just teach them the trick of don't pick up straight, it won't let go. But if you tip, it'll let loose and come right off. But what I really like to do is I like to use a metal tray, and I just glue a small magnet under here. I can hide it by doing a little bit of detail painting of gold or something like that on it, and it'll stick to the metal tray. If it's a wood tray or a plastic tray, then glue thin magnets onto your tray and put a washer on here, and it'll sit and they'll stay until they go to pick them up. Yes.
Max Norby would like to know, for the wax products, are you pouring it into shapes or free form carving from blocks?
These were all shapes. The round ones up here were actually a mold for round ice cubes. These little candies up here, those were all, that's a candy mold. Candy molds work wonderful for that kind of stuff. And these were actually an old candle mold that I found that I worked with from there. The bottom actually to give us a crust there, I just used craft foam. Yes.
Michael, you talked about the glasses, but can maybe you talk about the plates and the bowls that you're using? Are those real plates or plastic?
Okay. Yes. The plates on the dessert trays, they are actually charger plates. Just this the vinyl charger plates and candle holders that have been glued on. Right now, these were just hot glued on. Next time I use them, I will be doing an epoxy because they have a tendency to want to snap off a little bit. The seafood is actually on restaurant plates. I don't mind putting those on stage. They have a nice heavy look to them. Plates can be hard to do because you have a thickness. And when you use, even when you're using a more expensive plastic plate, you can see you just don't have the look that of the edge to go. And you can try to put, glue 3 or 4 of them together. It just doesn't look right. So if it's just from a really good distance, plastic works wonderful. But otherwise, you do have to go to something. But do try to find something that is heavy duty. Try to avoid China at all points. Yes.
Mary Jo has Thanksgiving on her mind.
Yeah.
She would like to know how you would make a turkey.
How I
Gobble,
would make
gobble.
a turkey. I've made a couple turkeys. It has what I found works the best for me is the foam. Again, the upholstery foam. I've done it with styrofoam. I don't like the feel, and I find it's harder to carve with. One of the tricks that I did learn, though, was don't try to do it all in one piece. Carve your basic shape. The legs are separate, and then you attach them. It's hard to do a bone, but a really easy way of fixing that is to use just a plastic Halloween bone, or I have many times just boiled some chicken bones or some turkey bones or whatever, and put a hole down in the foam and shoved it down in there. That kind of little bit extra really goes a long ways in making it look realistic. Again, I would also, in doing that with a foam, I would do the same thing I do with the bread. I would paint it with the glue to get that crustier, baked look. Yes.
Michael, I'd like to ask a question. What is some recommended ways to store these props once you've created them? How do we
I thought you had a question.
them?
I'm so sorry.
Jamie started talking. You can't hear him. So Jamie, I'm going to repeat that for everyone. Jamie is asking the recommendations you would have for taking care of and storing these items once they've been used.
Okay. I am a big proponent of the plastic bins. A lot of my food stuff I put into clear plastic, or ones that that are at least somewhat see-through, so that I can see what it's in. They stack really well, and it's really easy to take care of, and it keeps dust off of them. That tends to be the biggest issue with it. Again, like I said, especially with the silicone clay, I try not to stack them without having some kind of a tissue. Parchment paper works really, really good to layer those things in if you need to. But yeah, all my food stuff goes into vinyl or plastic bins. and then I also make sure that I don't have them in places where there's a lot of temperature fluctuation. That tends to age materials a lot and really fast. So good shelving units and good tubs. And if you have to use the opaque tubs, just label them. Just put labels on it. You'll save yourself so much time in pulling and opening things up and looking. And every time you handle them, there's always the risk for some damage. But on the same token with these things in storage, you need to understand that, yeah, you are going to do some repair from now every once in a while on them. They do get abused. Question.
Could we maybe say what show some of these were used in, just to give people an idea of where they were on stage for what purpose?
Okay, yeah. I don't know the show that these two were used on. I did them up for a friend. It was a two-person act where a couple was having a romantic dinner. Like I said, the sandwiches were being made for Junie B Jones for the lunch lady scene, and that never happened. The peaches were actually, they're just an experiment from there. Cookies have ended up in many different ones. The dessert things here have been in multiple shows at this point. They've been Beauty the Beast. They've been Calendar Girls. What else? All my shows tend to run together, and I start to lose track of what was where. Frozen, yes. Yeah, Frozen used a lot of them. I like working with the desserts, because when you have to have some kind of a banqueting table that they fiddle with, but they don't really do a lot of, then desserts make a really nice, big, bold statement. And you can be so versatile with them, so versatile. Do we have any other questions? So again, that's kind of what I do. Like I said, a lot of it is experimentation. Like right now, I want to use the silicone clay. I think it's going to be a good material to make ice cream. I've struggled with that one for quite some time. Foam doesn't do it. I don't like the texture. I've done a couple of different samples so far, not completely happy with it, but whenever I have a little bit of extra time, I just start to play. And it goes a long ways. And again, I can't say enough, print pictures, have them in there for your reference. Yes.
Hey, we got another question. Marie would like to know about the layered Jell-O. She said it looks really cool and wants to know if it's epoxy. I think she means the ones with the cherries on top to your right.
The cordials here? Yeah. These are just plastic cordial cups, and it was wax that was poured into it. First, I did just the first layer was simply regular paraffin wax, and then I colored the top layer. I colored it with the red and poured it in, and just a natural bled down into it a little bit, and you get the nice gradual look. It's just a fake cherry and a silk leaf in there from there. Story on this is when I put them all together and I had them all lined up, and all of a sudden in the shop I'm hearing this crack and crinkle and crack and crinkle, and I didn't know what it was, but you'll see it's at first I thought, oh my Lord, the plastic is cracking from the heat of the wax, but it's not. It's just that in places as it cooled, the wax started to separate from the glass. And also as it cooled, the wax itself fractured inside, but it was a pleasant surprise that gave me some really extra texture that I hadn't expected to see. Yes. One last question. Do you ever use spray foam? And maybe tell them your favorite kind of foam to use when you're making all these. Yeah, the Great Stuff foam, I do use that from time to time. It's hard to control. I did use that in Calendar Girls as to make some pastry and donut-y kind of things. But I tend to use the spray foam more for other natural things. It makes great rock and that kind of stuff. Another material that I have used a lot is actually the paper-based ground insulation. that you get in a bale. You mix that up with paper mache glue, and it becomes really nice and workable. You can put it into molds and form it, and then take it out and just let it dry. But you can also put it into like a 200-degree oven and just slowly dry it out. And it works wonderful, and it has a nice feel, and it's very lightweight. Well, that kind of takes care of our hour so that we can move on to the next roundtable discussion here. And I really would want to say thank you for joining us this evening. Do feel free to drop me any questions or anything like that in my at my email, and I'm always happy to answer that. So thank you again for attending.
Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate all of your knowledge and information. Just absolutely fantastic to see all of these foods that you've created, quite a few different methods in the process, but I don't think there's any single thing that you talked about tonight that I don't feel comfortable trying myself, which is extremely exciting. So I'm really glad and happy you shared so much with us. As you said, a lot of it's just a happy accident sometimes, and you never know what the outcome will be unless you give it a shot. I want to thank you again for providing your expertise. I also want to remind folks that we've got our roundtable discussion starting up here in just a few moments. So if you're going to attend that, check your email for the new invite. And for those of you that may not be attending the Intimacy Roundtable, if you'd be interested in sharing just a few of your thoughts about your favorite moments, as an attendee, you can actually raise your hand electronically through your link on your side. And I'd love to talk with you after we close things out for just a few moments. And also remind you, we've got a whole bunch of other roundtables. We've got our annual meeting, we've got our keynote address, and a couple more webinars coming up down the road. Tomorrow is Show Business for a Reason, and I encourage you guys to attend if you haven't already signed up. So we're gonna say goodbye to Michael. Thank you so much, Michael. We will see you next time. And again, thank you so much.